Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Racing Show here at RacePlazaMedia. Today, as per usual, we're gonna take a look. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself, guys. Hi, my name is Pia.
My name is Milan.
And today we're going to review some of the things that we watched over the weekend. We're going to have two videos. This one is going to be specifically about Formula 1 and Formula 2. And then the second video we're going to bring out about our race weekend recap is going to be about AMA Supercross as well as MotoGP. So two wheels versus one single-seaters, essentially.
And then the other video, the bikes are coming out tomorrow.
Exactly. So keep an eye out for that. So, might as well get right into it. The Formula weekend was a lot more exciting than expected.
Especially considering that I expected Formula 2 to be interesting because it has been always so far.
Yeah.
However, F1, we've already been complaining, and I'm pretty sure everyone's been complaining, but F1 was really amazing race. But let's talk about F2 first.
Yes.
F2, as always, they had first a sprint race, and then they had their main race the day after. So sprint race was already pretty wild. They were racing on a street track this week. It was in Melbourne, Australia.
Correct.
Even though it is a street track, I actually quite like it.
Yes.
However, I think the many safety cars that we did see this weekend was also due to it being a street track.
Yes. Because, we'll get into it because some of those incidences that happened ended up on the race line. So that made it definitely a lot more tricky. But yeah, so getting into Formula 2, we started off with the sprint race, which was already incredibly exciting. It's just 23 laps in total.
Compared to how much is a full race again? 33, right?
Exactly. I believe it was 33 is the full race. So it's just a 10-lap difference, but it did still, both made for an incredibly exciting race. Just the start.
For the F2 sprint race, it was already pretty wild. So we had the two, it's not Red Bulls, but they look like Red Bulls. Red Bull is not the official name, but I'm just going to say the two Red Bulls. So actually the other, so you have Hajar.
Correct.
And then you have
Pepe is the other driver.
The other driver. And Pepe actually had an excellent, incredible start.
Oh, such an incredible start.
However, Hajar had a good start too, but he was like a little bit slower than him. However, he just pulled into the middle of the track.
Yes.
Or of the starting grid, and essentially his teammate had to dodge him. And by dodging him, he took out
the Invictus driver, the
Balotelli.
I think it's something with a B. I'm completely blanking on it right now. It's he won Formula 3 last season, and
I think it's Balotelli.
No, it's not Balotelli. I don't think it's
Balotelli.
I'm trying to look right now, but here it's Bortoleto. That's what it is.
Sorry about that,
it was close. It was the Brazilian driver. He won last year's Formula 3 championship, so he had a little bit of a bumpy start to the
was like
season.
3 seconds into the race already.
Was it even 3 seconds? It seemed like immediate. I've never seen anything like it before. They didn't even make it past the pit lane exit.
Yes, which also Fittipaldi started from the pits, and like he just sees 2 cars crashing into the side of the. I was like,
where am I supposed to go?
It's like, I guess I'm just gonna go around, guys.
Yes.
Sorry about that. So, so that was already a wild start to F2, and we had, of course, a lot of overtaking.
Yes, lots and lots of it.
Then we also had, which was really interesting. So, Kimi Antonelli ended up crashing out.
Oh, yes.
And so did another driver. And it was really bizarre because Antonelli lost the back of his car. They went essentially almost wide into a right-hand turn.
Yes.
Kimi Antonelli lost the back and he ended up spinning out. And I think it startled the other driver. And I don't know if he was expected to get hit, but he ended up then also losing the car. And they both ended up doing like 360s. Next to each other without touching each other. Actually, I do believe the other driver ended up getting clipped or something like that.
I think so,
maybe.
yeah.
But they never touched each other, which was quite amazing if you consider how close they were next to each other.
Very true.
However, Antonelli's drive ended up then being over.
Yes,
he was not able to get out of the gravel trap. He was stuck in there. The other driver was able to, I think, return.
I believe he was able to continue.
On the other side of the track.
Yeah, he didn't end up in a gravel track, so he ended more on a pavement side.
Slash grass.
Yeah,
or turf.
Exactly. So he was able to continue. But I mean, it was an incredible race. So much action, so much overtaking, even up until the end. And then originally, Isaac Hajar was the winner of the race with.
Correct. And I actually told you, because they said at the very beginning of the race, there was like a little notice saying that race directors will investigate the incident after the race.
Correct.
And I told you, if there's more than a 5-second gap, at the end of the race, he will get a 5-second penalty, and it will not change the result of the race.
And he did end up with more than a 5 second.
He was 6 seconds.
I believe so.
In the lead, I believe. However, I had failed to realize that the FIA recently had changed the regulations
because they're a lot more strict or harsher on the penalties.
Exactly. So he ended up actually getting a 10-second penalty, and he ended up dropping down to 6th place.
Yes.
I'm not sure, to be honest, like this is gonna sound really wild, but if you guys think about it, like he still ended up getting his podium ceremony.
Yes.
And so he ended up actually still having a very beautiful moment. So he was also very emotional and stuff like that, because it's of course very exciting to make it to the top step.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's huge. It's huge.
Absolutely. And then I don't know if it's almost better that you get to have the moment and then you retroactively, because I think it happened a few hours later. We were both asleep because this was obviously Australia time when they're hashing things out.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So I think by the time the F1 drive race was happening, I don't know if the result was already posted. I don't recall.
No, I think it was because that was the following day, because we had watched the sprint race was on Friday.
Yeah, sorry, I totally forgot.
And then Saturday was the main event.
Right there. Yes. So I don't know if it's better that you get that moment, and then if, like, I don't know, 5 hours later, someone's like, you didn't win.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he had come down from the high at that point, or I don't know if it's better than like just never have that moment, and then when you actually have it, you get to enjoy it for.
Yeah, that's, I mean, yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. But I had a moment when I was watching him where I felt like his celebration or his joy seemed very contained. We had mentioned it briefly.
Yes.
So I was wondering, whether or not he had some thoughts maybe in the back of his mind, like, oh, there might still be a chance for a penalty. I don't know if he knew at that time that he was being investigated or not. So
I could imagine that it was communicated to him.
Yeah. So, I mean, spoiler alert, he won the main event race, which we'll get into now. But his celebration between those two, the sprint race and the feature race, were very different. Like, you could just see, I mean, I'm sure it was also just the relief that he ended up really getting a win, and especially a feature race event win, and he did have an excellent race.
Yeah, I did.
But let me not jump too far ahead.
Yes, so we ended up having Stanek coming in first, and Hauger ended up coming second, and then Kushmaini ended up coming third. So originally Hauger and Stanek would have been 2 and 3.
Exactly, correct.
But also, I think once again, Hauger in the last lap of the race, I think he was
absolutely incredible as well.
He did the same thing he did last race, and he just overtook he went around and then he made it onto the podium. If you're in F2, right, and you're listening to this very podcast right now, right? Listen to this. If Hauger's behind you, do not sleep, especially if it's the last lap, because he will go for it.
Yes.
He will just, and it was never overtly aggressive in my opinion.
I don't
but
think
it
so.
was every time I've seen him now do this, it seems like he's catching everyone off guard doing it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, he's waiting, he's lying in wait, he's being patient.
Yes, he's very patient.
He's very, very patient. I think he's
and it can be very difficult.
Yeah, I think sorry, microphone. I think he's maybe a little bit older than some of the other racers, or more experienced. So, I mean, maybe it comes with age or experience, but he's very, very smart. So I'm excited to keep watching him.
To see what he has in store.
Exactly, because also in the feature race, he did so well at first. He was leading the pack for a while. Right?
So,
I'm pretty sure he...
Was it Antonelli was on pole? And he then ended up catching him, or was he on pole from? No, he was on the pole from the get-go.
Yeah, because Antonelli was second. He was on the first line in the front, but it was also, I mean, luckily nothing happened at the beginning. Like everybody made it safe out of the first.
In the main race now.
Yeah, exactly, in the main race now out of the first couple of turns. So that was good. We did have a virtual safety car. We did have a regular safety car. So there was a lot of action still on the track. There was some strategy that came into play. At what point do people pit, which screwed up some of the drivers, including Kush Mani. Is it Mani or
Miney?
Miney?
Yeah, Kush Miney.
Including him. Unfortunately, he rode a beautiful race, but then strategy, he didn't pit when a lot of the others people had pit. Hajar pitted just at the last possible second before they called out the virtual safety car. So he got really, really lucky there, or it worked out perfectly for him.
So you had about 5 cars that were kind of, their strategy was like, hopefully there will be a
later safety car.
Yeah,
yes.
later safety car again.
Which is very likely in Australia.
Which could have happened, yeah.
Yes.
However, it didn't happen. So they ended up pitting like the second to last or third last lap. So they ended up, dropping way off the or off the like top 10. No one of them made it into the top 10, which was a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah, I agree.
And then you had Hajar who, so we had actually Hauger ended up crashing.
Yes.
I think it was the same corner as Russell did in
we'll get into that later,
in the F1 race.
That was a very active corner, because I think that was also the corner where Antonelli had crashed out or spun out. Exactly. So it was maybe a little bit more of a tricky corner. But yes, unfortunately, it happened to Dennis Hauger as well. And it was just so heartbreaking, because I was really hoping he would win, because he's been driving so well.
And he was also actually really, really fast. He was pulling away. And then it was like a mistake he made. He ended up in the walls. And then Hajar had just pitted, and then the virtual safety car came up in, I guess, in F2. I don't know if in F1 it's the same thing, but when the virtual safety car is out, I'm assuming it's the same in F1, you cannot pit.
Yes.
So he ended up essentially getting the perfect pit window, because he went into the pits before the sign came up, and it was literally, I think, just a few seconds.
It was,
And then he essentially, when he got back onto track after pitting, he took over pole position, even though there were other cars still in front of him, but those were all the cars that never pitted.
Yeah, and then he overtook, exactly. And then he overtook several of those drivers in like beautifully. I mean, it was so great to watch. I feel like he clearly dominated the race.
Absolutely.
The person who came in second, Paul Aaron, he also, or Aaron or Aaron? Yeah, Paul Aaron. He also said like he didn't even realize that there was somebody in front of him leading the race. I think he thought for a moment that he was the one.
Oh,
just because Hajar was so far ahead of him. I mean, not incredibly far, but at the end he almost had 5 seconds or 4.5 seconds of a lead. But
to be fair, also with all these cars pitting late, I could see that you might not know exactly what the situation is, because it could have been also maybe like you don't pit and you take the penalty. I don't know. I don't think it would have worked out, because I think it's a 30-second penalty.
I thought you get disqualified if you don't pit.
Maybe it's a DQ, but it's a 30-second loss in F2 for pitting or something like that, because the pit, it's much much longer pit. However, also very, very exciting, the third place went to
Maloney.
Zane Maloney, who is still currently the championship leader, and he started in P10 and he drove all the way up to P3.
An excellent race, because I mean, originally in the mix up there was also Antonelli was up there in the mix.
He was in P2.
Yeah, exactly. He ended up falling back a little bit. Of course, we had Dennis Hauger, who ended up DNFing completely. And then
Antonelli ended up coming fourth.
Yes.
I will say, okay, so once again, I don't think Toto did him any favors by hyping him up so much, because you can definitely tell that he jumped F3. And I'm not saying that he's bad, because obviously he finished in P4, but he started in P2 and he was in P2 for a while. But I think we've talked about this earlier, that at least my suspicion is that because he jumped Formula 3, he went from F4 directly to F2, is that he's still struggling immensely with tire management.
Yes.
Because he's multiple times now in different races mentioned on the radio that his tires are wearing off. And
faster than others have complained.
And then you could also tell that he was within DRS of other drivers for quite a while, but he was never able to make the overtake or catch someone. He would consistently lose on them, and the Australia track has 4 DRS zones.
That's very true.
So there's a lot of, technically time you can make up, but he was constantly really losing on people.
I agree.
So it's quite unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree. But I'm also thinking, because Ollie Behrman, who is also a teammate of his, and he's also not been as competitive thus far.
I mean, he did get pole position. We just never saw him race that race.
No, of course. That was the one race that he didn't end up racing. But then this race, he ended up coming in 8th. But he's also in a Prema car. So I don't know if maybe there is something.
I don't know. Maybe they still need to figure out the car.
But it's also early in the season, to be fair.
I do want to say 2 things. I was thinking about Oliver going back to F2, and he's like the popular kid on the on the school. How do you say schoolyard?
Yes, schoolyard.
And he's like the one that maybe got to leave early and went away and then came back or something like that. Or he's the one with the cool new toy, because I'm sure everyone is like, damn, this guy got to drive in F1. And then also because he has currently more points in Formula 1 than he has in Formula 2.
Yeah, and he has more points than several of the F1 drivers, to be fair.
I was also going to say he could always make the excuses like, yeah, listen, I'm kind of used to more to faster cars, and this is a little bit tricky for me to adapt to the slow speeds.
That's funny.
I don't know if that's going to fly, but
he did have a one moment where he did like a full 360. Do you remember?
Yes.
That was crazy. He just did a little show off, and then
I think it was the same corner again.
I think so too. I think that was definitely a tricky corner. But I mean, as we've been saying, if you've been watching our channel, if you've not yet, welcome. But we highly recommend watching the Formula Junior category. So F2, F3, F4, Formula Regional, F1 Academy. I mean, they're all absolutely fun to watch. There's so much excitement happens.
And I want to say, so Formula Regional, Formula 4, and F1 Academy, they do not have DRS. So DRS is implemented starting Formula 3. And I was, at first, before we watched our very first race in any of these categories, I was like, we'll see how much overtaking we're getting. No, overtake galore. If you, of course, in F1, we had a really great race this weekend. But if you're like, oh, I want to see more overtaking, more action, you could watch any of the other categories.
Oh, Formula E. I'm sorry. I didn't want to not mention that. Okay. Formula E as well.
Yeah, I didn't, because they're not under that umbrella.
Yes.
Yeah. But anyways, so watch that, because you get your fair share of action.
1,000%. Especially if you have a week where potentially, which we're expecting to have some slower F1 races, just watch one of the other ones afterwards.
Who knows?
But I mean, let's get into it. This was definitely not the race that we expected this weekend.
Formula 1, yes.
Yes. I mean, I did have high hopes just because last year Australia was absolutely insanity.
Yes.
We have a clip where we talk about our highlights from 2023 season of F1, which Australia was definitely a highlight because it was just insane. Several restarts. We had
2 restarts.
Yeah, exactly. And then we had half of the grid pretty much not finishing the race.
Yeah, so I think only 10. So everyone scored points.
Yes. So it was really, really insane.
Yeah.
But I also didn't want to get my hopes up too high.
Especially the start, nothing happened.
I know, literally nothing. I was like, oh my gosh, is this an omen for how this race is going to be?
At 2.1 or something like that.
Yes.
But yeah, so Verstappen right off the get-go noticed that something was off with his brakes, so he started in pole position.
Well, he did. Yeah, he started in pole position, and then like you said, the start was kind of.
Yeah, he said that he noticed going into I think the first turn, he already noticed that there was something off, and he was like, this is the start of the race. You're not gonna go incredibly aggressive because your tires are obviously not up to temperature.
Correct.
But he immediately felt something was off, and then it seemed like. Then he was struggling in a turn, and then we didn't see this live on TV because the camera was on someone else. But then all of a sudden, you just see the tail end of Carlos Sainz, passing him in, I think, lap 2 when DRS was enabled.
Yes, exactly. But he did it without DRS, I think. Still, was it not without it?
I thought he had DRS. Either way, he ended
mean,
up
yeah,
overtaking
still.
him very quickly. But however,
Which was shocking, I feel like, because we don't see a lot of overtaking happening of
Max.
Verstappen. Yeah, exactly. So when that already happened, I mean, the crowd went absolutely wild. We went wild.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy.
And then but however, you immediately could tell that there was white smoke coming from Verstappen's
Yes,
car,
shortly
and then
after Sainz
and then you
overtook
hear the
him.
radio message. Also, he's like, fire, fire.
Yes.
And then his car ended up catching fire, but he was able to take it to the pits. They obviously were able to put out the fire, and no one got injured.
Yes.
But he was out of the race.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I've told you this, I think after one of the free practice sessions, his power supply unit was replaced. So I don't know if there was an issue with that.
Well, they also said, the commentators had said that they had tried different braking pads or something for Red Bull. So maybe that's what it was, because that was an issue with
Also,
the brake, because you saw the smoke.
Well, you saw
come
also
out.
something like part of the brake or something fall off of his car.
Oh, that's true. That was on the track for the whole entire race.
It wasn't on the racing line, so no one bothered to get it.
That's true.
But yeah, so he was out of the race. So of course, anyone who's watching F1 or has been following F1 knows that once Max Verstappen is out of the race, things can get
It's
interesting.
like anything can happen now.
And it was really wild. We
Yes.
had friends over. We did a little watch party,
Yes.
and they watched their very first F1 race. And I was a little nervous. I was like, "Don't be like Bahrain.
Yes,
Don't be like
seriously.
Bahrain, because they will not be interested anymore." And then they ended up getting like one of the best races probably within the last year, besides maybe Singapore.
Yes, agreed.
And that was once again Carlos Sainz
Yep.
holding down the fort.
I mean, spoiler alert, he ended up winning, which is absolutely
Yeah.
insane. But I mean, he's an appendix lighter, so
Yeah, that's probably made all the difference.
exactly.
Yeah, maybe he needed some pain. So Carlos he just ran away with it. He was unstoppable.
I mean,
no
yeah,
one was gonna be able to challenge him.
No,
Interestingly
really not.
enough, I think before we move on and talk about that, is that Perez, so the other F1 driver,
A Red Bull driver.
F1 Red Bull driver, he's also an F1 driver. He ended up coming 5th. So I don't know if there was problems also with his car, if he was struggling. I didn't see his post-race interview, but I mean, Max did qualify in P1, so clearly the car worked on the track.
Yes.
I don't know if he also had a brake issue. He originally actually qualified P3.
No, I think he qualified P2, but then he got the grid penalty.
Three-place grid penalty for impeding, which, yes, of course, it was his fault,
Yes.
but I more fault his pit or his engineers, because
yeah.
why is no one
I
telling
mean,
people?
it's so frustrating. I feel like it's been happening a lot more recently.
However, it seems like the punishment is quite harsh. 3 places.
yes, yeah.
Yes. So I'm hoping this will be a wake-up call to the racing engineers and be like, I need to be on top of that, because 3 places is a big deal.
Well, but I mean, it is a big deal, but also like he did impede Hulkenberg, and Hulkenberg also said afterwards, he's like, oh, well, that was my first lap, so it wasn't necessarily going to be my best lap. But then the second lap, he didn't do as well. So if he would have done better in the first lap, maybe he would have made it in
he
Q2.
Didn't
so
seem too upset based on what I
No.
read. He seemed actually pretty be like, like I think he had admitted that he had already had a tough
he
made a
said-
mistake on
yeah.
that lap. So, and then he couldn't get a second one together. But it is still unfortunate, because in the end, even if you get a grid place penalty, the other driver might get punished more, because you might not make it into next qualifying.
Exactly. So you don't even give them the chance to fight for
Yeah.
a better position. So that was unfortunate. So I think that was going to probably start or continue more rumors whether or not Perez is going to keep his seat next season, just because even if Verstappen is out, Red Bull should still be fighting for the podium. Or one would expect Red Bull to fight for the podium. But
Well, not even for the podium, but for the win.
Yeah. I mean, I was being generous.
Yeah, but
being
I'm just saying, like,
the podium. But he wasn't even up there.
If we're being realistic, if Checo wants to win this championship, right, this is the races where he has to take advantage of it.
1,000%.
This is the races when Max is not racing. This is what you need to win. Essentially, every race that Max is, first of all, DNFing, you need to capitalize on.
Yes, 1,000%.
And of course, every race Max is not winning is the race that you should be winning.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna read about it again. I didn't see his post-race interview, so I don't know if he had anything to say. I'm sure over this week we'll hear some more information.
Yes,
I think, of course, so let's talk about the driver of the day and the person who just like deservedly so just really killed it. Like
Oh, I
Carlos,
know.
honestly, I'm so incredibly happy for him.
So happy for him. I mean, he even said it. He had a tough year with not getting his contract renewed. Then he landed on the podium, which was great. Then the appendix removal. Now he won.
And
I mean, it just proves what an excellent driver and also athlete and competitor he is. I mean, I'd be surprised if he doesn't have a seat next year.
yeah, I mean, we've made some speculations before we get to that, though. I want to say, like, even I said some things, I think last week or something like in the racing news video or something like that, that I'm like, oh, you know, I do always feel like I always underestimated Carlos as well. Not saying that he's a bad driver or something like that, but because also always this narrative is pushed at Charles is like
is their number one driver.
Even though he's not the number one driver, but he is the number one driver just if you look at the contract and stuff like that, right? But I think like really in the moments where you have to put everything together, it's Carlos that consistently does it. Like Singapore was probably one of the only chances last year where a non-Red Bull car had the chance to do it, and Carlos did it so brilliantly. It was also in our top 5 or top 6 of last year.
Highlight videos of last year.
And once again, this race, he was absolutely unbeatable.
Yes.
You could not catch him.
No.
He outpaced everyone.
I think at the end, Charles was catching on
but
a little
who
bit.
knows if he was pushing at that point.
He also said he was struggling with his tires at the end. So, I mean, it's whatever. He won by a margin. He didn't have to fight really anybody.
No.
Once he had passed Max, that was pretty much his race, which I was so happy for him. Also to see his dad, and they had a moment when he was standing on the podium.
Yeah, and even Charles said that after lap 2, and when Carlos had overtaken Max, he knew that P2 would be his and P1 would be Carlos's. And I really I'm just so happy for Carlos. And we've talked now going to that, we were like, what if Mercedes gives Carlos a 1-year contract, right? So to give Antonelli 1 more year in F2, which it looks like he might need, and which is fair.
Which is totally fine.
Fair,
yes,
like,
absolutely.
mate, you know, get all the experience in there and then be ready for F1 instead of getting burnt in F1, right?
Correct.
But maybe they'll get a 1-year contract and then he will go to Audi.
Yes.
That would be awesome. However, you know who apparently has also cracked open the door?
Red Bull.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not surprised.
Well, apparently there's like a fierce rivalry that was between Max and Carlos.
Oh, interesting.
In the past. But apparently Horner, I'm sure, like, who wouldn't want Carlos in a team? Ferrari, clearly.
Yes.
But
yeah.
But I mean, who are you trading for? 7-time world champion?
No, of course.
You know?
And I'm so excited that Hamilton is going there, especially considering how the Ferrari is improving and is driving currently.
It's also kind of part of me is like, Carlos has been working with this car and like he's the one helping putting it together, and he doesn't get to reap really the benefits of it.
I know.
But I'm excited. I think the F1 would be absolutely mind-boggling stupid if Carlos would not be in the group for whatever fucking reason next year.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But I do wanted to highlight a few other people that I thought had really excellent races. You go first because I have someone specific in mind, which I don't think we've talked about really that much.
Okay, gotcha. Well, there's definitely a couple people. I do want to mention the McLarens. They were also really excellent yesterday. I think you know exactly where I'm going with this, which hurt me a little bit, pulled on my heartstrings. Basically Oscar Piastri was in front of Lando for quite some time. He was trying to catch up to Leclerc. He didn't make up the time. And then, of course, there were team orders, switch with Norris, which he did. Lando tried to catch up with Leclerc. He also didn't. He did make a gap between him and Piastri, that he didn't close the gap to Leclerc. I feel like there was no real fighting really between them going on at any
He ended up
point.
being almost 6 seconds behind Leclerc.
Exactly. So, I mean, in my heart, also because Oscar would have been the first Australian to ever be in a podium on Australia, he should have given...
In a while.
No.
Mark Webber has been?
Yes.
So has Danny.
No, not in Australia.
Really?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought I had
No, I think Webber was the last one.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so I feel like because he didn't pass Piastri athletically, you know, like as
So
in a race. So I feel like
so here's the thing. This is very tricky, right?
It is.
Because in Haas, you actually ended up getting team orders too. Magnussen was told to give Nico the go-ahead, and it actually ended up benefiting Haas tremendously because both of in the Haas made it into the points. So we have Nico in 9th and Magnussen in 10th.
Yes.
However, I do believe by switching and Nico being the faster one and Magnussen being able to just tail him, they ended up benefiting from that.
Agreed.
Right?
I was
However,
hoping McLaren was gonna do that, but that didn't happen.
so this is the second time now there have been team orders. Last year there was a team order given, and I would say like I think Lando should get like maybe two. I mean, in general, he didn't ask or we didn't hear the radio. I think it's always so lame when they ask for it.
Yeah.
Let me pass. In F2, someone actually did that, and then their racing engineer said, if you're faster,
Just pass.
Just pass.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is.
Yes.
If you're faster, then go ahead and.
Like, we don't want the teammates to necessarily kick each other out. Well, maybe you do because it's on your bingo card, or is it on my bingo card?
I do actually have it on my bingo
But
card.
usually that's not what we want. But we do want them to compete with each other because...
Well, I'm just saying, like, don't be such a baby.
Yeah.
Like, if you're faster, then go past them. So I get it. Team orders, you thought, and I mean, Lando said that he thought that they had the pace for P2. I don't think he showed it.
No.
Really? I know
No.
that there were laps that he was faster, but in the end, you were 6 seconds out from the Mercedes,
Yeah.
from the
Ferrari.
Mercedes
Oh,
is
that's
a whole nother
other
story. But I'm just saying, like, I think the team order should not be given many more times because you have not taken advantage of it.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't know. I just always think it's a little lame. Like, bro, if you're faster, then do it. But then again, with Nico, I wasn't mad about it. But then again, Nico did show it, and he ended up bringing both of them into the points, and that was tremendous.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, indeed.
tremendous
indeed.
effort. Especially because I first thought that Albon, who took over Sargent's car, would
Yes.
make it into the points. He was at some point 10th, but Magnussen was able to fight back, and he ended up passing him in again. I was really happy because. Yes, of course, Albon, I would have liked for Williams to get a point.
Of course.
But Magnussen has been really a great team player.
Yeah, he's been fighting so hard this season. I feel like he's been so visible this season. I feel like sometimes last season he got a little bit lost. But I'm just so happy for the Haas team that they're actually scoring points this season. So that's really, really exciting to see. You wanted to mention somebody else?
Yes,
I have two more things I think we
I
need
actually
to talk
do,
about.
but I want to talk about the Mercedes situation real quick.
Okay, go for that, yes.
Both Mercedes did not finish. Lewis did not
so
finish
sad.
because I don't know which lap, all of a sudden his engine just shut down.
Yeah.
It just turned off.
Yes.
And then he was able to pull off to the side. Fortunately, like no accidents or anything
Yeah.
like that, and they were able to take his car off. He already had an absolute terrible weekend.
Yeah.
This car just seems like
Yeah.
straight to the bin.
I mean,
Straight to
it's-
the, you know.
it's so,
I know
so
he
sad.
just said it's not the evil twin sister of the W15 or
Yes.
14 or whatever, but it's not that good. And then
No.
Russell ended up crashing in the second to last lap.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the race, which ended up giving Alonso, he ended up getting a 20-second penalty for that because they said that what Alonso was doing
Was erratic and caused the incident. And
did they say it caused it, or they were saying like he was just driving erratic? Because essentially,
he was erratic and it was dangerous. Essentially,
he said that he was trying to take the corner differently.
Yes.
He wanted to lift a little earlier and then push later. So he ended up lifting. They said about 100 meters earlier than he had ever in the race, and then he ended up braking or using the brake pedal during a point that he hadn't done at all
Yes.
during the race. And so afterwards, he ended up getting a 20-second penalty.
and 3 points
Penalty
on his
points
license.
on his license.
Yeah, which I
Um,
think is so harsh.
So because people, some I think people are maybe saying like maybe because of that, Russell caught dirty air and that's why he crashed out. Russell's crash wasn't that scary, but what was scary that he ended up on the middle of the road and he was
Yes.
flipped on the side. So
Yeah.
he's kind of like, if you're watching this like on the side like this.
Yeah, I mean
in
that
the
was
middle of the
that was
road.
really
And
scary.
he was also really scared because he kept calling for red flag. I'm in the middle of the road, and obviously he can't just pop out of the
no,
car.
exactly.
Fortunately, however, no one crashed into him. But yeah, it was a terrible weekend for Mercedes. We did say this, and this, however, doesn't go into the narrative that Ben Sulayem,
Oh,
the FIA president, is full of shit is because the 20-second penalty ended up putting Aston Martin a point behind Mercedes. So Mercedes is still ahead in the Constructors' Championship. And Ben essentially was accused last year to prevent a penalty being put on Alonso.
Yes.
So I don't know. It's weird. It seems very harsh.
Yes.
20 seconds and 3 penalty points. I don't know. I don't know. You guys let us know in the comments what your thoughts on it are. I want to read up a little bit more about it, but it seems quite intense.
I think so. I personally think it was too harsh because it's also, I feel like it's racing. Yes, you maybe done something differently, but even from his post-race interview or from his talk with the stewards, it was not intentionally erratic or intentional that he did it. He did say that there was a little bit of a mistake that happened, so things didn't go quite as he had planned. But I still feel like it's racing.
I will say, if there's anything to finesse,
of course,
it would be Alonso the finesser.
But
because,
I mean, also, then there's also Russell, of course, and he's also very smart about how he expresses himself or also how he uses the radio. So he was using language like, oh, he was driving erratic, which are all like, I feel like
trigger words.
Keywords, exactly, that might affect the judgment of the stewards. Because, I mean, he knows potentially which articles might be in danger of being broken by Alonso. So I don't know. I feel like it could go both ways. But I feel like there's one last person that we definitely need to shout out quickly at the end. I actually wanted
to talk about someone else, I think, than you. But you go first.
Well, I wanted to talk about Yuki.
Yes, I wanted to talk about someone else.
Oh, interesting. Okay, gotcha. Well, just quickly, because I don't want this to go on forever. But I mean, just a shout out to Yuki because he's been doing so well. Absolutely. I mean, the first race we talked about it, he had a little tantrum. He did the bomb dive on
Danny,
which was, I mean, immature.
It was not immature on him, but the team was also wilding out. Like, what are you doing, mate?
Yeah, but I mean, it's been nice to see him in the points. This time he scored additional points just because of Alonso was pushed back, of course, because of the penalty. So it's just good to see because, of course, I wish him a good race. But then, of course, on the other hand, on the flip side, Danny has not been doing as well.
I'm so tired of this narrative that Danny, because he clearly was showing something last year, right? Otherwise, they would have not brought him back. Red Bull is not that sentimental, right? No. So I just want him to have a good race, like get into the freaking points and show everyone that you are still the honey badger.
Exactly.
Do some crazy overtaking. Like, I want it for him, you know?
Yeah, and I just really, really hope that RB Cash App, Visa Cash App, whatever, they don't cut him early because they're notorious. I mean, the Red Bull family is notorious to do that. So I hope they give him a chance. Yeah. But yeah, you go.
Yeah, I wanted to, so Yuki ended up finishing 8th. So I think also like this whole thing has been lighting a fire under his butt, and so really, really great. But I wanted to say actually a person who was also fighting for points for the 10th place, who ended up getting screwed again by his own team, was Valtteri Bottas. I didn't realize that, but unfortunately, if you guys are not aware of this, in the last 2 races, the Kick Sauber team has always ruined their own drivers' races because of their pit stops, because they cannot get it together. And then once again, both drivers had a terrible pit stop, and Valtteri's first pit stop ended up being 30 seconds long. Because there's, I guess, something...
Which was 10 seconds longer than the average pit stop in Australia, about.
Yeah, so that ended up ruining, essentially, his race. I guess there's something wrong with the nut lock on the left back tire or whatever. They already had issues with that before. Yeah. But Valtteri was racing for points, and that essentially just took him out of the... And it's so frustrating because...
frustrating.
In general, it's not your fault, right? Same thing, Joe was also doing great.
Yes.
I don't know if he was racing for the points. I only know that about Valtteri.
But I mean, he was doing well, but it's
just so frustrating, especially like Valtteri knows how to put it together. He knows how to score points. He knows how to win races, and it's just that I really hope he gets an Audi contract. But it's also like, imagine that it might be this year and it might be next year. All of this bullshit,
struggling,
and then there's no guarantee that when Audi comes that they will be competitive.
Exactly.
There's nothing more in my life for them to come in and be competitive.
I would love for them to be immediately competitive.
I don't want another team to be struggling. I want the team to come in, and I don't want them to be like dominating, but I want them to fight for podiums and for the front.
Agreed.
And it's just not a guarantee, and like I can't imagine it being easy to being like every time you go into the pits. to be
You're
like,
you
fingers
don't know what's
crossed,
gonna happen. Yes. Ugh.
But
Yeah.
overall, what an amazing weekend in
Yes,
racing.
indeed.
There's also, when we're going to talk about tomorrow about the whole MotoGP and AMA Supercross, also, overall, it was an amazing weekend for racing.
Oh, 1,000%. Yes.
All across. And yeah, as always, let us know in the comments down below. What did you watch? How are you feeling about everything?
Yes.
Check out our bingo boards.
Yes.
I am doing quite well.
Surprisingly.
I think arguably I have the harder bingo board.
One would have thought originally, yes.
I'm quote unquote, I'm 2 away from hitting bingo, but
Yes.
one of them is being a little bit more difficult
Yes, indeed.
than the other one. But yeah, I'm very, very excited about this whole thing.
Yeah, but thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please remember to like and subscribe. And as per usual, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.